Welcome to the office of Florida International University in Washington, D.C., which is an extension of our main campus down in Miami, where we produce minority graduates in leading innovations in environmental resilience, brain health, defense technologies, you name it. But here in D.C., we focus on impactful research and offer exceptional academic experiences and internships for students, and some of our student interns are here today, so welcome. And we're cultivating valuable partnerships with national stakeholders and federal agencies, all while bringing Miami's dynamic energy to Washington, D.C. So my name is Gavin McCabe, and I am a Georgetown University master's student of conflict resolution. And I have the privilege this summer of working here at FIU in D.C. to help with governmental relations, student engagement, and planning public policy events like this one right now. So thank you to everybody for joining me on the first of many different events and discussions and panels that I'll be helping with FIU throughout maybe the near future and throughout my career. We are also excited to recognize the recent designation and creation of the South Florida Climate Ready Tech Hub. FIU was recently awarded federal funding to lead one of 12 tech hubs around the nation, and ours is the only one fully focusing on climate technologies. Our hub will focus on coastal resilience against extreme weather events and include innovative technologies such as our ultra-high performance concrete, which will enable the transportation and defense industries to create resilient structures on demand. I'd like also to take a moment to inform you of some interactive activities that we're going to use throughout. So if you look here on our screens, you'll see a QR code. Feel free to scan as you will. During our presentation today, I'm going to pose all of you a question, and you will be able to scan this code, and it'll create a word web that we'll be able to see what are the most common answers to this question. And so the question I'm going to pose to you now, and we can take a look at it later on, is going to be, what do you think of when you hear climate technologies? What comes to your mind? What do you think is the most important in a few words or less? So thank you. Furthermore, later on, we'll have another interactive activity because of this small group here. And we're just aiming to have it more of a discussion-based event rather than, having a bunch of people speak to you all day, because I'm sure you guys are all tired of lectures. So, without further ado, I'd like to take a moment to introduce our wonderful panelists. Aya Lindquist here is the Associate Program Manager of Climate Resilience at NASA. With deep roots in the Caribbean, she has worked with communities across the nation on environmental justice, regenerative agriculture, and environmental education. And we are excited to welcome her to FIU today. So please welcome her with a big round of applause. Dr. Crowell is the director of the Institute of Environment at Florida International University. With over 25 years of ecological, environmental, and aquatic research experience, Dr. Crowell has led the Institute into partnerships with prestigious organizations and presented solutions to environmental threats to places like the White House and beyond. And we are also honored to have him here today. So please join me in another round of applause. So thank you both for joining us. And I will allow you now to have a few minutes to present about yourself. So Aya, if you'd like to go first.
All right. So I'm trying something new with this presentation. Nice. So just bear with me here. Do I just click anywhere?
I think Daniel should be able to help with this.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, pardon us 1 second. We're trying new innovative technologies here at FIU in DC, so.
I know, I'm pretty loud. Is this just recording?
Yeah.
Okay. So I usually start with introducing myself with a map because I find that to be the easiest way to ground us in place. I'm a geographer by training, so this is how I think of the world. Oh, wait, we gotta go back to slide.
There we go.
So I'm from St. Croix in the United States Virgin Islands, which is the biggest of the Virgin Islands, but it's still pretty small. And this is where my story starts. An island that is very vulnerable to climate change, but I lived there for about 3 months before my family took me back to Maryland, where they're from, where my mom's from. My dad's family's from St. Croix. I grew up on the bay, another area, very impacted by climate change, actively sinking, something that's always been a thread in my life. Then, as I was a kid, my mom was a single mom, so I was actually, I'd spend my summers down in South Florida, so I'm also very connected to South Florida, specifically Fort Myers, specifically a really small town called Matlacha. About 2 years ago, I watched our family's house in Matlacha get washed away by Hurricane Ian, right into the Pine Island Sound. And, well, if I wasn't already involved in the climate movement, I am full 10 toes down in it now. We're sitting on business, we're involved. We go over to college. This is where I originally actually started to become a veterinarian. And as I was doing this, I was like, I want to have a bigger impact. And I don't think I want to deal with sick animals all the time. Fair, very valid. So I decided to look into geography. This is something I never thought would be a possibility for myself. I didn't even know what geography really was. And then I start reading the course handbook and I was like, wait, this is so cool. This is everything I've ever been interested in. This is awesome. Went there, went to school, started studying, learned GIS. If you're still in school, highly recommend learning some kind of technical skill. Even if you think it's the last thing you'll ever do, it will help you. And it's going to look great on a resume. But never did I think between then and now that I would be at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, split between there and headquarters. I have to show a badge to get on center. This is very new to me. Ooh, we are just exploring PG County now. But there we go. Needless to say, I get to do really awesome work, and I'm really grateful for it. And I'm surrounded by these resources and these things in space that can tell us amazing things about our home and our planet, whether it's sea surface currents, whether it's land surface change, chlorophyll. I actually work on this specific program called the Surface Biology and Geology Satellite Mission. This is a satellite that won't launch until the end of the decade, but it's been in production for 20 years. We work on a 20-year timescale to community engagement. Think about how many communities you can involve with understanding our changing planet in 20 years. That's where my work comes in. And I was recently, as of May, appointed to the Associate Program Manager of Climate Resilience at NASA, which is a brand new program. So we're learning to figure out which projects we're going to fund to use Earth observations like the ones we just showed, like this, to understand our planet, whether it's heat islands, sea level rise, agriculture, drought, fires. We're looking at all of it, and we want to understand it all so we can do things like plan for a climate resilient future. What is this? We'll get into what kind of technologies this can involve, what kind of training's available. This is something that's interesting you. And yeah, that's me. Go deep.
Thank you so much. Dr. Crowell.
Oh, all right, follow. Okay, so let's bring the map back up. I'll see if I can do this on the fly.
Yeah, let me see if I can go back a slide for you. And then,
She's programmed for her lifetime.
Yeah.
where do you want to go? You want to go Florida?
No, I want to see the U.S.
U.S. We'll go. There we go. We can zoom out.
Whoa.
Whoa! We're in the Gulf.
Corpus Christi.
Oh, no. Now we're in Canada.
All right, well, maybe that won't work. I thought I would be clever and use her existing map. You can't just shrink it. No, okay. All right, so I grew up in a small town outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I'm going to follow her genre, her approach. The reason I bring that up is when I was a kid, the Cuyahoga River, which is one of the largest
I'm back at people. Sorry.
Oh, right. Thanks. The Cuyahoga River, which is one of the largest tributaries of Lake Erie, caught on fire. So imagine that, a river caught on fire. Couldn't get my head around how a river could catch on fire. And it turns out we polluted it to the point where oil and gas were just floating on the top of the water, and a old steamer ship had a spark, caught the river on fire, and the river burst. So my father will tell you that I have been enthralled with human impacts on water resources ever since that time. I think the battery went dead. Anyhow, from there, I after getting all my degrees, I ended up in Utah, at Utah State University, where I worked on the Colorado River. the Colorado Compact, all of the legal issues, Native American issues associated with who owns the river rights, water rights, endangered fishes, and the sort of restoration and conservation of that river. One of the interesting trivia questions is if somebody asks you what's the most dammed river in the world, the Yangtze comes up, the Nile comes up, depends on what the metric is, but by percentage of volume, the Colorado River is the most dammed river in the world. We hold back a higher proportion of water behind dams in the Colorado River than we do in any other river in the world. So when people start talking about water wars, watch the U.S., not just Africa. It's getting intense. At the same time, I was working on the Colorado River. I also worked in Puerto Rico. Those are my Caribbean ties. I've been part of the Liquillo Long-Term Ecological Research Program in the Liquillo Rainforest, El Verde Rainforest, for 30 years, looking at water, ecosystem function, and the importance of rainforests from a natural filtration perspective and providing fresh drinking water to a small island nation like Puerto Rico. I then went to Notre Dame and taught there for a while. Then I went to Harvard, taught there for a while, and then I ended up back here in DC working for the National Science Foundation, where I ran the long-term ecological research program for the U.S. And so that's my tie to DC and sort of learning how life is from the other side of what I had been doing from the grantor perspective rather than the grantee perspective. And then of course, now I'm at FIU, where I have the great privilege of being the director of the Institute of Environment, which houses 155 faculty, about 70 graduate students, and 40 or 50 research technicians and staff. So there's almost nothing associated with the environment that somebody in the Institute doesn't touch on. That's my story. Given your approach.
I'm sorry I couldn't get the presentation to work.
Thank you both so much. So now we're going to take our seats and we can proceed with some interesting questions. All right, so welcome both of you to the office today. I'd like to start with you. One thing that we talked about earlier today and something that strikes me a lot from your work is the interaction that you have with the engagement with these communities that are going to be directly affected by climate change or already are being directly affected. But for the audience and for myself, what are the ways in which emerging climate challenges have already affected these vulnerable populations, these vulnerable communities? And what are the ways in which in the direct future they're going to affect them? And how does NASA, engage with these new technologies and these new systems and these communities to help resist against and mitigate against climate change?
This is a very loaded question. No, but it's great because okay, can I actually turn this off? Or is it recording?
It's for the live stream. Yeah.
Okay. I immediately started thinking of different communities because we work globally, right? So I was in South Africa in November, and the project I was brought on to work on was actually invasive species management. And most people are familiar with South Africa's past and apartheid and the history there. Not a lot of people realize the connection that has with the plant species. And in South Africa in particular, with it being a Mediterranean climate, there is now, due to colonization, a lot of pine trees. Wattles, hakias, these are all trees that technically shouldn't be there. And the implications that they've had is in, I believe it was 2017 or 2018, there was a huge drought, a water crisis in South Africa. And one of the main factors was the prominence of these trees, these pine trees, and these other invasive species, and the history of colonization that comes back to it. And now they're trying to remove these trees to restore their water resources. This is just one community. And now NASA has this program called Bioscape. It's a project. It's the first biodiversity survey of the Cape Floristic region. And the communities there are involved. And we're involving them in the applications, involving them in the studying of the ecosystem, but then also in the restoration of the ecosystem as well. NASA uses our aircraft, so we're flying multiple instruments over that area for collecting to figure out which species are where you can't always see them, because sometimes these things grow on the edges of really, really steep mountains where you can't get to them. But our planes, we can fly them. So we're using this kind of bird's eye view to understand our ecosystems, which is really, really helpful. And then what we can do is figure out ways to put this data in the hands of users, whether that's natural resource managers, NGOs, governments. We're putting this data in their hands so they can choose to do with it what they want. So it's a bit of community empowerment, but then also just resource sharing. We have this large National Aeronautics Space Agency administration that we can leverage to support other people around the country. And then when we talk about Native communities, which I work a lot with in the United States, there's things from hurricanes to droughts to fires to integrating cultural practices and being able to show, using flight campaigns and satellite data, the ways that these indigenous practices have changed the environment and helped support the environment compared to industrial agriculture, for instance. So we're able to put data in the hands of users to support their causes. And that's our research base, and then we support them through that.
What kinds of technologies specifically, whether it may be online or whether it may be something that you're actually physically holding, are you able to give to these communities to have them engage with that?
Yeah, so a lot of my work is training based. So this, I could throw a bunch of big words like imaging spectroscopy and the electromagnetic spectrum and how we use that, and we use certain spectral bands within that to understand how much water is in this specific leaf, right? We can do that, but then we can also show, okay, you're having issues with drought. Let's use data from EcoStress, which is an instrument on the International Space Station. We can use data from that to look at the plant stress and how it connects to heat, how it connects to evapotranspiration, which are things people understand, right? They can feel the heat, they sometimes can see the evapotranspiration, they can see their plants drying up, and then we show them how to work with these big data sets using open cloud resources like GitHub. We use things like our science managed cloud environment, Cyverse. We can leverage all of these different platforms to get people working on analyzing this data for their region over time. And then we can make these trainings available online for free. So whether you're in New Mexico or whether you're in Texas, whether you're in California, whether you're in Maryland, no matter where you are around the world, you can use this, and it's free, it's openly available. So that's the main thing that we are trying to get out there is this is your tax dollars at work. We're making this available for you.
Now, Todd, you work a lot with the South Florida community, specifically along the coast and with the Everglades. What types of innovative technologies are you implementing to engage with communities? And specifically, I'm very curious as to how you're using, new emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence or autonomous robotics or those kinds of things.
Great. Yep. So the first project I'll talk about, thanks to the government relations folks, Carlos and his team and others, we got a large earmark to put in a whole series of groundwater wells along the coast. And about 8 years ago, I wrote an op-ed piece for the Miami Herald, and it said, before your feet get wet, you might get thirsty. All I heard about was flooding and sea level rise and stuff when I got to Florida. But in fact, the thing we're most vulnerable to is our drinking water supply. We only have one aquifer, the Biscayne Aquifer, that provides all of our drinking water. We have signs that salt water is intruding into that because of sea level rise and other things. If that water gets salty, we don't yet have the innovations or the capacity to desalinate water at the scale that Israel currently does that we would need to give Miami enough drinking water. So we're putting in a whole series of groundwater wells. Dr. Mike Sukop, who's a groundwater hydrologist, to basically use technology, some of the sensors now that are tiny underground cameras and stuff, to basically measure saltwater intrusion and basically build a vulnerability map to areas that are vulnerable to having salt water move into the groundwater wells. We currently operate about 114 groundwater wells. About 70% of those show some amount of saltwater intrusion. 8 or 9 of them show significant amounts. So that's something I pay a lot of attention to, and we're using the latest technology to basically provide real-time data associated with that. As you all know, if you know anything about South Florida, Biscayne Bay is on a very tenuous tipping point, right? Just a little bit more elevated temperature, more fertilizers, more failed septic systems, and more flooding events, and the bay will die. We've already lost 80% of this of the seagrass beds and stuff like that. We're again another earmark from Congresswoman Wilson, again because of Carlos's and team working with them together to talk about the vulnerabilities. We're standing up a brand new autonomous vehicles and robotics and environmental sensor building laboratory to basically design and manufacture the kinds of robots we need, autonomous vehicles. And there's a couple of coastal cities around the world that are already doing this. That basically the water quality in these coastal areas are being continuously monitored with a set of drones. And so one of the things we need to be doing, this works in the Everglades, it works in the Florida Keys, it certainly works in Biscayne Bay, is to have all these autonomous vehicles going back and forth and coupling that with satellite data and stuff coming from NASA and other kinds of imagery to basically look for hotspots, look for problems and stuff like that. One of our drones picked up, just randomly, we were just out testing it, picked up a leak in one of the sewer pipes that flows through Biscayne Bay. We all know that a few years ago we found out that one of the pipes going out to Virginia Key had been leaking sewer for over 2 years. So just being out there and having these drones going back and forth, we have already randomly found one big issue that we were able to solve right away. So, you know, the future is in robotics. And the thing about those instruments is, and we have a whole series of buoys. We have one out here that Carlos has transformed into one of the smartest tables you'll ever see in your life, right? It could be loaded with sensors, but they return a huge amount of data. So artificial intelligence is absolutely crucial now to take data from space, which is huge amounts of data, linked with data from sensors this big across all those scales and make sense of it. And most importantly, make predictive models about vulnerability and stuff like that.
That's amazing. Thank you. And Todd, I'm going to aim this question at you, but both of you feel free to answer. What types of climate technologies would you say, and you say robotics is the future and artificial intelligence is the future, what is the most critically needed now in terms of what would help the best that we don't currently have? Because we have some capacity to have these robotics involved, but you know, in a dream scenario, what is the next step in the evolution?
So I think we have most pieces. What we don't have are enough of the pieces to scale up at the level we need. And I'm going to tie this back now to your question about the social justice or injustice of climate change. I can go off the shelf buy a temperature sensor and a humidity sensor, which is a good predictor of mold, for $80. What I don't have is enough of those to put all through Little Haiti in every single house that's vulnerable to extreme heat and bad insulation and no air conditioning and mold. So from a human health perspective, from a social injustice perspective, we just don't have enough of the stuff. We don't have the networking capability to create real-time, real networks that will really help inform folks, especially those in underserved areas and lower income areas, with the kinds of data they need, and then to be able to go through and mitigate those factors. So I think the communications of software and data streams and stuff like that is sort of the real need right now.
I will add that I think the communications of these technologies is the biggest thing, because we have so much technology. It's always, if humans are good at one thing, it's technology from the start of time, from the start of our time. So communicating these and understanding, like when you think of AI, what's the first feeling you get?
I think it's science fiction.
Science fiction, right? There might be some fear. There's distrust a lot of times. And I think that's one of the biggest things we have to do is build that trust back with the community. And then also through that is communication and sharing resources and sharing knowledge, education, coming and speaking to folks. I think that's really the first step in advancing these technologies as well, getting more minds in the room.
Right. And so in terms of getting more minds in the room, and Todd mentioned the kind of the social justice aspect of this, what have you found to be the best practices of creating these partnerships, sustaining these partnerships, whether it's with local communities in vulnerable populations or federal agencies like NASA?
Transparency and authenticity. Being who you are. Like when I come into this space, I'm Aya first, and I'm also NASA, and I recognize that I show up as a government agency, but I'm also myself. And I think being honest about why you're in a room, being honest about, what you can bring to the table, not over-promising and under-delivering, but just being transparent with people is really that first start in building trust. Because people, they're going to judge you from first look no matter who you are. And it's really about taking the time to just be yourself and then also interact, get to know that other person as well for who they are first, and then figure out if this is going to be a successful partnership, or maybe you got to work with somebody else. But by building that relationship, they might even be able to help recommend you to who would be a better partner to work with, or you're going to go into a really awesome project together and do something amazing.
Now, I know that you talked about how these NASA projects are usually looked at on a scale of 20 years at a time or even longer. So how do you measure that impact of those partnerships right now with those communities in the short-term scale that we live in?
So our satellite missions can be 20, 30 years, and then if they're talking things like Landsat, that's been going on for over 50 years. So, but then we also have projects like Blue Flux, which is in the Everglades that we're working on right now, and that's 2-3 years of funding. And how do you build an authentic partnership with 2 years? Right? Who's ever sent an email and waited 2 months for a response, right? Like when that time isn't there, you got to show up. Being in person is one of the most helpful things if you can, especially now that we're moving through that and going into in-person spaces. Showing up in person, showing up to events like this, showing up to community events is one of the best ways to start interacting with people and just say like, hi, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, I'm here to build this connection. I feel like I wandered, but.
Yeah, I want to emphasize one word you just said. For me, those partnerships work when it starts with listening. One word, listening. I think universities have made a mistake in that we view ourselves as the last bastion of pure and absolute knowledge. And to some extent, historically, that's been correct. But when we're talking about the kinds of things we're talking about now that impact people every single second of every day, at every walk of life, the mistake we've made is going into community and saying, oh, we know all this, and we haven't gone in and said, what do you think? What do you feel most vulnerable to? What do you want to know? What is it that we can provide that would help you make decisions on a daily basis? So for me, whatever partnership I embark on that includes local communities and individual households and individual families, it has to start with us listening and finding out what it is what they need.
I completely agree. I mean, building these local partnerships and not engaging with, here's how I can help, but more so like, if I can support you or where do I fit in, even if you don't fit in, I think that's important to know. But you previously worked at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and Todd, you also serve as a professor at FIU. So this question kind of goes for both of you to build off what we were just talking about. When you're dealing with these local partnerships, these people, most people have not gone to a high education university, and most people do not work and train at NASA every day and live and breathe these things. So how do you actually engage with these communities and inspire people to engage with these issues themselves so that they can, educate themselves and learn?
So I can start, but I want to connect another dot. So interestingly, Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, we call it CERC. I'm on their evaluation committee. So every year, if CERC scientists come up for evaluation, I'm one of the people that evaluates them. So it's a small world. But communicating complicated ideas and communicating the kinds of things that, for me, I can look at one of these data streams, and in 1 second, the pattern and the axes values tell me everything I need to know about what happened yesterday, today, and what's likely to happen tomorrow. But 1 out of 99 people have the training to do that. And so I think, again, it comes down to listening. How is it that people want us to provide them with these complex sets of information to be the most impactful and easiest to understand, that they can make real decisions on a daily basis? And I think, again, there's a huge niche for people who are really very interested, like yourself and probably some other folks here, in terms of sort of the art of communicating science. Right? And so I'm a big proponent of actually mixing art and science. And when I was at the National Science Foundation and overseeing the long-term ecological research programs, I actually created a program called LT Arts instead of LTER, LT Arts. And I provided funding for all the long-term research programs, including the Everglades folks, FCE, to have an artist in residence. And my only requirement for them to be paid a salary from the National Science Foundation, every year they had to provide some kind of art product that communicated what they learned from that particular research site, that in some artistic format that they could then send out to the world. And so I think we really need to think very hard about how it is we can take this complicated information and make it digestible and useful and informative to people. I think that's a huge challenge.
I actually have a friend that's an artist in residence right now at Deering Estate. Oh, yeah. Yes, I do. And I was going to go a very similar direction. When I was at CERC, it was my first internship after college, and it was for creating climate change curriculum for middle school students in Prince George's County and DC public schools. Very large intern project. This was also 2020, so I started March 6th, 2020, and it went virtual very fast, but it was really interesting. It was a really interesting time to be working in this. And what we did was we didn't just reach out to science teachers. We reached out to math teachers, we reached out to English teachers, we reached out to art teachers, because climate change hits almost every area of our lives, if not every area, and we wanted to make sure that students were getting the knowledge and the tools to deal with this in all of these different aspects. You know, now climate moves into the therapy space even, right? When we talk about climate anxiety and these big feelings, and you need more than just data to deal with this. You need art, you need writing, you need math, you need all of these different tools in your toolkit. And so, yeah, it's really about figuring out ways that people can connect, whether it's agriculture, whether it's their favorite water sport, whether it's that hike they went on last week, whether it's what's on their plate. You've got to find the ways to connect with people.
So that's amazing. It sounds like you're saying even as we progress into the future with these emerging technologies, with artificial intelligence, that human creativity has to be front and center in all of this, which I think is amazing. Let's take a moment and look at our boards here. I see a lot of us have put together some key words that we have said. Do you, the panelists, have any reaction to any of these words? Can you see them properly?
I can't.
Yeah, feel free. We're interested in saying what do we see here is the initial reaction of people to climate technologies, but what maybe is more important is what we don't see. So from this kind of word web here, what should people be thinking more about when it comes to climate technologies and climate resilient technologies in general?
Well, so the elephant in the room and the word that, or the phrase that's not up there, is carbon sequestration. If we are going to have any meaningful impact in your lifetime, I mean, we can cut off all gas and oil combustion today. It's a few hundred years of lag before we even see a signal in carbon dioxide. So,
okay, Carl.
Oh, carbon is up there? Oh, okay.
Just added it.
And so, time is kind of running out, and all these things. Earth system science, unfortunately, has one of the longest lag times for cause, effect, and reaction of any system we currently know about, and so that's a real challenge. But if we don't figure out how to scrub carbon from the atmosphere, and now methane is the next beast that's 22 times more dense than carbon dioxide, and is a consequence of the breakdown of all kinds of plants and stuff that have been frozen in the permafrost in the north and are now thawing and releasing these huge amounts of methane. If we don't figure out how to stop that stuff from getting into the atmosphere, we are literally toast. Right?
Aya, any reactions?
That's a mic drop right there. I will say what I see is I see a lot of progress on here, but I think what's missing is justice and that justice component, because you can have an innovative future, right? You can have all the solar energy, all the wind energy you want in the world, but just like you were saying, if you stop tomorrow, some things won't change. And at NASA, maybe at FIU too, we use the phrase Earth is a system of systems. Whether that's the water cycle, carbon cycle, but then also we have things like justice system, right? We have healthcare systems. We have all these other systems that we are a part of every day as well. And we have to think about how those fit into climate technologies as well and prepare ourselves. And I will say, I mean, as a elder Gen Z, I'll say myself, I feel like my generation is really cognizant of this, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think all generations are becoming a lot more aware of this and thinking about how we plan for our futures. But I'd say that is the biggest thing for actual resilience. We might have environmental adaptation, we might have environmental mitigation, but when we talk about resilience, that is a much deeper topic.
Thank you. That's very insightful, I think. So we're going to take a break. Carlos is our guest here. Okay. We have a very special guest that we'd like. Welcome. Yeah, of course.
How are you? I'm Jessie.
I'm Aya. Nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
I'm Gavin. Thank you for
Gavin.
joining us
Of
today.
course.
If you like. Yeah, absolutely. So everyone, I'd like you to please help me welcome a very special guest here today. Francesca Covey, Chessie, is the Chief Innovation and Economic Development Officer for Miami-Dade County and serves as the Regional Innovation Officer and a critical lead for our newest climate-ready tech hub, which we touched on earlier, which focuses on those critical technologies like the ultra-high performance concrete. So please give her a warm welcome.
Hi.
So if you'd like to say a few words on, what has recently happened with the climate tech hubs and what our future plans are and what's exciting.
Sure. So who's in the room?
So these are mostly our student interns and other great guests.
And we're on camera.
We're also on a live stream.
Okay, great. So it is wonderful to be here. I saw the beautiful sign that said bringing the Miami magic to DC, and it definitely warms your heart to walk into this beautiful, beautiful space. Thank you, Carlos, so much for having us. So my name is Francesca Quesada Covey. As you mentioned, I am the Chief Innovation Officer and Economic Development Officer for Miami-Dade County. And I also serve as a Regional Innovation Officer for the Climate Ready Tech Hub. We have just spent the last 2 days with the EDA out of the Department of Commerce talking about our designation and our funding as one of 31 tech hubs and only one of 12 that was funded. And it has been an incredible opportunity to celebrate this enormous win for our community. And it is a win for our community that has been a long time coming. So what we are building on is nearly 30 years of experience where we have become the place that builds the most resiliently in the United States. And all of you in this room, and I'm going to make an assumption that all of you that are listening online are probably too young to remember Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Was anyone alive in 1990? Yeah, we got one hand in the back. Me too, Carlos too. I was alive too. And so Hurricane Andrew devastated South Florida, and it was the first billion-dollar extreme weather event that the United States ever faced. Last year, for reference, we had $18 billion plus extreme weather events. And in that moment, in 1992, what we did as Miami-Dade County is that we said, we will never be this susceptible to extreme weather conditions, so we are going to change our building codes, and we created the Dade Standard. The Dade Standard remains a global benchmark for building codes. And so most places, which will surprise you if you're from Miami, don't actually have building codes, right? They have suggestions and they have permitting guidelines, but they don't have a standard building code. And so the Dade Standard is the standard in a lot of places. And our standard is much higher than most of the standards that are used in other places. And so we grew an industry 30 years ago based off of the Dade Code. At first, many developers said, do not have the Dade Code, it is going to kill industry. And what we saw happen is that industry adapted. So as all of you are thinking about policy applications and how do you make sure that you work with stakeholders in business, you can refer them back to that moment when they said that industry was going to be killed. But I can assure you it hasn't, because now we have $3.5 trillion in assets in South Florida. And the way that we define South Florida for the Climate Ready Tech Hub is from Palm Beach all the way down to Monroe, so about 6 million people. 3 million of those, just for reference, live in Miami-Dade County. And our Climate Ready Tech Hub focuses on sustainable, resilient infrastructure, because that's what we do really well. And we have 3 areas where we want to make sure that we are commercializing at global scale, that take that expertise and that turn it into new products. The first is climate ready coasts. So how do we make sure that we are reinforcing our coastlines and stopping surge as it's coming to hit our coast? So that is with the University of Miami, with sea hives and sea walls and sensors that you can put in the water and all sorts of cool things that'll stop wave action. The second is climate ready infrastructure, which FIU is a lead, and where we are focused on clean cement and clean concrete, and that's the sub-component project that got the EDA funding. And then the third is climate-ready energy efficiencies, where we are thinking about how do we heat and cool in more energy efficient ways? And then also technologies that are a bit newer, such as how do we put turbines into the Gulf Stream and take and harness that energy? All of this is supported by a governance model that is run by Miami-Dade County, a workforce model that is run by the Good Jobs Challenge winner, Miami Tech Works, based out of Miami-Dade College, and a policy and entrepreneurship vertical that is run by Miami-Dade Innovation Authority. The work that we are doing, it is fundamentally grounded in equal opportunity, which means that we are deploying technologies across our community to make sure that we have equitable access to them. And so our first demonstration sites are at Florida Memorial University, which is a historically Black college and university in the city of Miami Gardens, and also with the Miccosukee Nation, which is in the Everglades, just west of Miami-Dade County. I am going super fast because I have to get on a flight, but also because I would love to answer maybe 2 to 3 questions, if that's okay, Carlos. If not, I can keep on riffing and keep on telling you about the great work that we're doing. But I would love to answer whatever questions you all have. Does anyone have a question? Yes, here in the front.
Use that. So, obviously, Florida, really, really big state. What counties across the state are working directly with Miami-Dade on stuff like this, if any?
So that's a great question, and it's actually a question that we got today from the senior advisor for equity from the Department of Commerce. So in our hub right now, it's a quad county hub. So it goes from Palm Beach down to Monroe County. So Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, Monroe, down to the Keys. And that's where we started. I want to put it in perspective because, actually, let me finish answering your question, then I want to put it in perspective, which is we also have worked with the University of Florida to be a part of this hub. And so they have opened up their pre-permitted sites along the Gulf Stream and the Panhandle. We haven't talked to other counties, but we will now. However, I gently push back on this question because, the question is, how do you make sure that you're a super region? Miami-Dade County alone, if we were a state by the size of our GDP, we would be the 35th largest state. We are a super region. And when we combine it with the 6 million people and with the other counties, we are an enormous region. We are the #1 freight cargo destination in the world. Our trade is the best in the world, #1. So we want to work, we definitely want to work, but we also have enough opportunity in our Quad County region that the first thing that we need to do, in my opinion, and as the RIO, I'm going to make sure that we do this, is drive to successful projects and commercialization of our tech at home in that super region because we have enough market penetration, and then scale it. It's a great question because it's the same question that the Department of Commerce asked us. And maybe I'm being hard-headed about it, but I want to make sure that we recognize that we have a huge opportunity at home.
Excellent. Thank you.
One other question.
Yeah, in the back.
Hi, thank you. Even though you have to go to a flight, I really appreciate the time that you have here explaining this to us.
I do whatever Carlos tells me, so yeah.
I also do whatever Carlos tells me, so good way to live. But my question is that you mentioned that we have climate-ready coast, climate-ready infrastructure, climate-ready energy efficiency. What would you say is the one that needs to be prioritized more, considering that we're expecting to have a very active hurricane season in the fall?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not going to prioritize them for hurricane season because the truth is that we're not going to meet this hurricane season. But I do think that when we think about how to prioritize, what I would offer all of you, and as you're thinking about the future and setting policy and thinking about commercial strategy and being economists and being engineers and everything that this room I'm sure wants to be, is we face water in 3 ways. Most people just think about the water that comes on shore during storms. But we are surrounded by water, the water in the air, the humidity, that makes extreme heat worse. And we are built on top of water. So the places that are going to be most affected by our changing relationship with water, which is really at the end of the day what we're all about, there are going to be some places that are on the coast, but Sweetwater. Does everyone know where Sweetwater is? Yeah, Sweetwater is inland. It is at sea level, at the height of sea level. It's at 0 feet above elevation. When there is extreme weather conditions, it floods, and the water has nowhere to go. Why? Because the water that's underneath us with sea level rise has gotten higher. We've paved over huge areas. The earth isn't as porous. And then we've dug up and made lakes places. So I won't say which ones, let's not stack rank them, but I just want all of you, as you are thinking about the future of an area that we love so much, the hurricanes are going to hit the coast, but I am most concerned with the areas where you are at elevation, where we've dug it up and where there's nowhere for the water to go. And those areas are areas that most people don't think about, right? When you see the cameras and the hurricanes coming, you normally see them right on the beach. And we need to make sure that we're thinking community-wide, not just for the multi-million beautiful homes that are on the water. So a different answer to your question. We got to go. One more. Okay, does anyone have one more? No? Okay, well then we're done. Emily. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're very excited about the Climate Tech Hub, and it's an amazing innovation. So, for the next portion of the program, it's going to be a little bit interactive, so allow me to explain it, and we can maybe give our panelists a little bit more of a break. But If you're at a table where you're by yourself, I'd like you to ask you to maybe join somewhere where there's a couple other people. We're going to do an exercise here where we come up with our own kind of unique kind of questions and our own unique ideas. So if anybody wants to join a larger table, please feel free to do that now. Panelists can participate. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this exercise is based off what's called a liberating structure. And you've probably done something very similar. We call this 1, 2, 4 all, but it could be anything else. So for the next minute, I'd like you to think to yourself, by yourself, in silence, what is the, what are one of the most emerging problems in whatever field that you're in? We're all pursuing different careers, different internships. How will those fields interact with climate change and climate technologies? So start thinking to yourself, where do I fit into this piece? And then after that, I'll give you your the next step.